New York, some other random places throughout the United States, but almost none of them are here.
We have some companies that are really changing up. Magic Leap, Plantation, taking over American
Yeah.
Express building.
Yeah, we do have some. I'm not saying we don't have any down
We
here.
just didn't hit that edition.
I'm just saying, yeah, that's right.
It's not like it's a.
It's like they're getting there, maybe next year. We'll see. But what about other factors underlying neighborhood change? Crime, so,
Is there popularity?
right, popularity, the next hot place.
CRA.
Could be CRAs, community redevelopment areas.
Yeah.
So they're put in place to ideally deal with slum and blight. I mean, one of the biggest things right now is that the Tri-Rail, all aboard Florida, there's a stop that's being built in southeast Overtown Park West, community redevelopment area. And it's going to get rid of a lot of the slum and blight, but what they're going to build there is essentially high-end. So how many of you are familiar with the concept of gentrification?
Yeah.
We're essentially bulldozing the ugly, lower-end stuff in favor of higher-end stuff.
Cistron.
How many, yeah, Sistron. How many of you think that's a good thing? How many of you think it's a bad thing? How many of you are kind of like,
I'm in between, yeah.
because on the one hand,
Yeah.
if something's gentrifying, you might have to pay less property tax. You might have more stuff that you want, which means you might have to drive not as far away to get those types of things. So that might be closer to you. On the other hand, if you're barely making ends meet in terms of your monthly bills, that gentrification makes it a lot more expensive. So an example like Sistrunk, where you've got sort of the arts corridor that's starting to creep further west, and the idea is that you have this historic African-American neighborhood, and the idea is what's going to happen when you have these artists and lofts and other uses start creeping further west into Sistrunk. So that can lead to a variety of different issues, because if you displace people, then where do they go? So I was at a conference with property assessors, and one of the property assessors from Miami said, we're probably not going to have any low-income housing in Miami-Dade County in 10 years, because they're all going to get priced out of the market. Because property values are skyrocketing throughout Miami, throughout the entire county.
What about the related group proposed project for the affordable housing?
She's talking about the Liberty one.
But how many units are we talking?
Is it over 200 or something?
Yeah. But if you look at the figures for the demand for affordable housing,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
it's like that's kind of like throwing a rock in a hurricane. So it's, but I mean, but
But do you think that that's a trend? Like maybe that's just the beginning? Maybe, no?
that,
Can't afford it.
based on the lot sales, the lot prices that I've seen,
If people can't afford the affordable housing.
right?
No, I'm not
That's
like this.
no, but seriously, that's a bit. There've been some scandals in South Florida. I won't get into all of them, but basically they were inflating the prices on all these affordable housing developments, kicking it back to things like construction companies. So the Carlisle Group,
Big guy one,
yeah, they got millions and millions of dollars because they were padding their construction costs for affordable housing. So it was like the most expensive affordable housing, which is sort of messed up. Because you want it to be nice, but if it's really expensive, people start asking questions. It was essentially their chief financial officer that said, hey, this isn't passing the smell test. And when you have your chief financial guy blowing the whistle on you, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because he knows where all those numbers came from. So you do have some issues, but not all people that build affordable housing are corrupt. So, and they do have things like low-income housing tax credits and everything else in Florida to build affordable housing, but the problem is that the amount of demand is extremely high. And if you're a developer, are you going to go through all the bureaucracy to fill out all the paperwork to get low-income housing tax credits and go through all the compliance things? Or are you going to say, you know what, I'm going to build billion-dollar condos because there's a market for that also? So what are you going to do? If the market's wanting million-dollar condos versus affordable housing, you can see how that's sort of playing out. So the market is getting more of what they want. Not there's anything necessarily wrong with that if you're a market capitalist. And the idea is that, well, if a developer wants to build affordable housing, and there are some developers where that's all they do because they know how to do these tax credit deals, they do plenty of that. But if the land's too expensive like it is throughout South Florida, then it doesn't make sense to do it, because you're going to end up losing so much money unless it's so heavily subsidized that it makes it worthwhile. So think about how your neighborhood where you grew up has changed. Actually, we already talked about this question, right?
Yes.
Should we just go to the next question? You guys sure? All right. So let's discuss this. What is livability? Let's go like this. How would you define quality of life? Is your quality of life now better or worse than it was 10 years ago? Actually, let's just focus on quality of life. What is it? Right, so it's largely relative, so whatever you think it is. In other words, what's livable to somebody that lives in Sistrunk is going to be completely different than what's livable for somebody that lives in the city of Wellington.
But the definition of basic quality of life is based on the basic human activities. So we all have to work, we all have to educate, we all. So when you
Right.
when you have quality of life and you're able to perform those activities without, you know, having to drive for 2 hours or having to walk for, you know, quality of life means you have a chance to do those activities that are important to your life.
Right.
Without going out of your way.
Let's go like this. What's the quality of life for somebody that can live in downtown Miami versus the quality of life for somebody that works in downtown Miami? So it all depends on if you have the money to be able to afford to live and work in downtown Miami. Then your quality of life might be pretty good. But if you work at one of the restaurants in Miami, quality of life is probably a lot less because you probably don't live anywhere near there. So you have to figure out the commute and everything else. And this is the cost of parking if you're not taking public transportation. So there's some additional cost involved. And then again, how many people worked in the restaurant business? What about retail? Okay, so you know probably we're going to get rich working in retail and restaurants for the rest of your lives, right? So if you think about the salary you were making and trying to live in downtown Miami, how did you make that happen?
And after that, perhaps having children, have to drop them at daycare and pick them up.
Right.
So that's quality of life.
Right.
How you perform your life activities.
Right. So quality of life sort of ties into livability. Again, there's some things that you can define, some things that are sort of more difficult to define. They're more qualitative or relative. So if you were to think about what makes a place more livable, like how would you make South Florida more livable?
Sometimes it's reducing commute time, sometimes
Right.
it's creating, I think there's more live work play designs that are being created. They're expanding highways,
Like they need to do what they did in Dallas. Dallas essentially has, I like to call them bunk highways, even though that's not really what they're called. But it's essentially an elevated highway and a toll road, but all together, but they're separate. Does that make sense? Together but separate.
An elevated
That doesn't make
highway?
sense.
Huh?
But like the local lanes are actually elevated, separate from the express lanes. And so the express lanes are for people who are going, there's maybe just a couple of important exits off those express lanes. And the local lanes, that's for everybody else who doesn't want to pay money. So you essentially have a toll road and a highway, but they're all together. So it's sort of like what they're doing on 95 with the express lanes, but the express lanes are on the same level.
I see what you're saying.
So and the reason why they did that is because they can maximize the space, because they had the air rights for the highway, and they can maximize the lanes. Kind of funky. I think it's sort of working, but they're still really congested.
I mean, I think we tried to do I-95 extension in the last 5 years with that traffic.
Right. But there's still a ton of traffic.
But there is,
Sharing is
it
separate.
is, but it's,
Right.
I remember there was a lot of congestion and accidents before the extension, and I think the congestion has lightened up a bit, although it depends on, I don't often use it, so that's.
It's still messy.
It is messy, there's bottlenecking,
There's
but I feel
still-
like there's bottlenecking anywhere you go.
It's messy in a different way though.
Yeah.
The way how they did the exits.
Almost every day.
There is still an accident?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
That's-
they got too
I
creative
drive
with
70
it.
miles a day on 95, you know,
Yeah.
up and back, so.
Oh, but are you on
It's
I-5?
almost every day that there's an accident.
Are you on I-5?
Now, just 95.
He's gonna sell us something.
No, it's just
I'm just saying, shock, I'm trauma from last semester.
Oh. So, a bigger, broader question, what do all of you think the region needs? What? Hey, one answer was love. Yes, the region needs love. From a real estate development perspective, how many of you, if there was more public transportation, would still not take public transportation?
Reliable.
That's true.
In fact,
It's not reliable, correct.
and direct.
And direct.
Like for me, for example, my office is right across the street from the tri-rail, but it doesn't make sense for me to take the tri-rail because you have to go to Hialeah. I live in Brickell, so if you go to Hialeah, I have to go all the way around and then go all the way back east. So it's just, you know, it's not direct.
Right. And so, I mean, and that's the problem is that I think all of us would take public transportation if we could have a bus or light rail pick us up at our houses and go. So the way a lot of things are oriented in South Florida, sure we have light rail and we have buses, but they don't necessarily work well or in a timely fashion. To some extent, it's just people don't use them. For tri-rail, it's like for every dollar that's spent on tri-rail, it's subsidized by I think $4 to $5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's not enough people taking it now. And then we're going to build all over Florida, which will go only to West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. But still, some people are going to take
But
that.
my thing is, like, with the trains down here, like he said, like, you have a train stop, and then you get off, and it's like, what do you do? Like, up north, when you have a train stop,
Right.
there's a bus or a subway or a...
Right.
Well, that's the reason it doesn't work.
That's
here,
why
because
it makes sense. It's not like you can walk from...
development.
I mean,
No, I feel like so
car
car
oriented.
Yeah.
less connectivity.
There's not.
It's just not south.
And that's where all the
It's all
development is.
Tri-County, but-
All the development is to the west. And I mean, in a lot of cities. You still see some infill development in all the cities.
Like,
But, and maybe this might be a little bit Delray centric, but all the stuff in Delray that's being built, it's all in the west. And so that just makes it worse because you're talking about 2-lane roads that can't accommodate all this additional
like
traffic.
west of 441. Not that.
No, I mean, west of,
Fine, but
95.
right,
It's all in 441,
yeah.
really.
West of 441.
And the
West.
turnpike, sort of between the turnpike and 441 in that area.
I'm not sure the region needs.
I just...
Can I throw something out there? How many of you when you graduate, how many of you when you graduate are planning to stay in South Florida?
The verdict is out.
How many?
For the
Okay.
time
Things
being.
never go per plan.
Okay, because most of my students at FAU, when I asked the same question, 80% of them said they're gonna leave. And when I look at a lot of the job data, it would be great for all the students to graduate and stay here. But bigger picture, how many of you familiar with the concept of brain drain? The concept of brain drain is that the youngest minds in an area, or just the, not the youngest, the brightest minds in an area, all leave once they get degrees. And this is something that I knew of growing up in the Midwest, where people would get their degrees and they'd leave the Midwest to get jobs elsewhere. I found out the same thing exists in this region, because the mix of jobs isn't necessarily that great. Or the quality of life and the livability also aren't necessarily all that great. So people will actually leave this area, which blows my mind, because the weather here is great, for the most part. And I mean, I have a decent job down here, but I think a lot of the students have issues getting those types of jobs, or they just don't necessarily like the area. I don't really know quite yet, because I don't have enough data to determine that, but I think if we had a better mix of jobs, because when I see a lot of the stuff that's being built, we have so much retail in South Florida. And that would be great if I was a huge shopper, but I still like it when a smiley box shows up at my house. Because when I shop on Amazon, I don't have to talk to people. I can just order stuff. That's right, Prime, definitely. So, but there's so much retail in South Florida. And the problem with that is that retail jobs, like I already mentioned, don't generate a lot of income. When you look at how much housing costs down here, it's a lot. So in terms of what the region needs, there's a lot of stuff, right?
Did you name other things?
Did I name other things? I said a lot, generally speaking. I said with jobs, transportation, maybe a better mix of housing. What else? Anything else?
That's two.
Infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big issue. We're surrounded by all this water. Desalination plants are really expensive, but we don't really have enough freshwater sources to support the growing population that we have.
Is there a lot of brownfield in Miami?
A lot of what?
Brownfield.
Oh, brownfields? There are. If you, maybe next time, I'll show you some data that, well, some of you might not really be comfortable about where you live if I show this data. But there's a lot of contamination, especially some of these brownfields. There's some groundwater contamination, so it's not just site-specific, but it sort of goes out a little bit. And so you can see some of these maps through the EPA where you just see like a bunch of red areas. And a lot of these red areas are also lower income areas because it's so expensive to live in areas that are far away from things like landfills or brownfields that you go to where the cheap land is. Sometimes that cheap land, it might be right next to the highway, or it could be right next to a landfill or some other type of contamination because nobody else wants to live there. And if they have the money, they move away. But some other people that can't afford to live anywhere else, they live right in those areas. So, I'm ready for like a 10-minute video. Yeah, I don't know why I'm asking questions. This isn't a democracy.
Let's just do it.
I'm just kidding. That's wrong. It's like 9:30. You know, I'm still standing.
I feel like you're more wasted than us.
Maybe. Well, because I'm not used to this. Like this time, I'm unwinding.
Right.
If I can bring
Bottle
up something.
something.
Sure.
Okay, so my friend is trying to buy a house for her sister down in Miami, and the property is 1940. They put it on the market for $299, and there's a realtor who's trying to negotiate $275,000 for this house.
375 or 200?
375, and they asked for 300,000. But going back to what you were just saying about how they rebuilding on old properties, like
Right.
destroying, that's like what's happening. Like the properties in
Right.
Miami are so expensive.
They want the land, not the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's pricing her out of the market, and she's trying to compete with these foreign nationals that are
Right.
bringing in all this cash, and she's not able to keep up because she was thinking maybe make an offer for 310,
Right.
315, but now the guy's sitting there. Huh?
The bank probably won't insure all those old
Yeah.
properties that have cast irons.
And that's the thing is, if you show up with a suitcase of money, you're king or queen, depending on your gender. But the idea is that if you have money, that house is sold that day. If you have to go to the bank, qualify for a mortgage, go through all that stuff, the market here is still ridiculous. Yeah, crazy, ridiculous, whatever you want to call it. That cash is still king. And again, so if you show up, and that's what's happened. That's what's sort of priced people like me out of the market, because it's like I don't want to pay top dollar because I'm going to be living in it all the time. I'm not somebody from somewhere else in the United States or even internationally that just wants to buy something that I can hang out in and rent it to people. So trying to get these things, just in my neighborhood in Delray Beach, stuff has gotten really expensive. But people were paying more for that, and they were paying cash. And when I moved to this neighborhood, some of the homes sold for 30 to 40% more than they were worth when I moved there. And I moved there in 2013. So we're not talking about 2008 or right at the height of the recession, but we're talking about the last couple of years. So on average, I think property values in Palm Beach County at the residential level last year increased 29%. Yeah, on average. Nothing behind those numbers except for speculation. Here's how we got in this mess in the first place.
And to add to that, like I'm just looking, I like my job, but I'm just looking just to kind of plan my relocation to Miami. And like the jobs, they call these jobs like project manager. The average project manager should make about 60,000. That's
Right.
like I've been seeing 45,000.
Right.
I've been seeing property accountant 45,000. I'm seeing attorneys $23 an hour, which is 45,000. And it's like, oh my God, like seriously, like salaries have become like not
Stagnant.
moving.
I know.
Like it's incredibly horrible. And you're moving down to an expensive area, so it's like you would expect to get paid more money.
Right. But that's the thing is when there's people elsewhere that can pay that top dollar, that, because normally, most economies, when you talk about cities, the idea is that the housing that exists in that city, for a majority of people, it's built for people that work in that city. South Florida, completely different. I mean, you know what it gets like in places like Fort Lauderdale, between October and, we'll just say February, all the Canadian license plates, because when the economy tanked, you had a lot of, whether it was Canadian pension firms or just Canadian people that had money, because the Canadian dollar was a lot stronger compared to the US dollar, they bought up a lot of these condos along the coast of Fort Lauderdale. And then they went back and they sold them all to people in Montreal and Toronto. That's why you see all those license plates down here at that time of year. One thing I learned, minor tangent, then I'm gonna hit play on this video so we can get it over with. One thing that I learned is I was getting my tires changed, and there were a bunch of Canadians at the Goodyear place, and I said, why are there so many Canadians here? And not because I'm like anti-Canadian, but it was weird, because if I'm on vacation, I'm not thinking, hey, I should get some new tires. The reason why is there's a huge tax on tires in Canada. So people will actually drive their cars down here, have their tires changed, because we don't have this surcharge or whatever the tax is in the United States.
But why does that all go to Florida? Why don't they send to like New York?
Because they have homes here. So they have a home here now, they can park their car, get their tires done, not have to pay that tax. All right, you ready? So let me preface this video by saying that urban plan, most of the things that the Urban Land Institute has online, urban plan's been used in everything from graduate schools, like here, University of California, Berkeley, MIT, some other schools, all the way down to high schools, right? All the videos that I looked at, trust me, I spent a couple of hours trying to find one that was tailored towards college students. They don't exist. So what you're about to see is something that looks really infantile. And it's no offense to you, this is just the videos that existed. So it says like, play this video to sort of orient you. And a lot of you are gonna be like, seriously dude, you're gonna make us do what? So all of you are a lot more seasoned than what you're gonna see. And I'm not gonna preface it anymore, I'm just gonna hit play. You'll get what I'm saying, because I was trying hard, because there's a higher expectation for all of you. And again, the fact that a lot of you have responded to RFPs, obviously most high school students have not done that. And actually, pretty much all high school students probably haven't done that. So you have a little bit more exposure and everything else. So what you're gonna see is stuff like, and they're gonna present it, and they're gonna pretend like I'm city commissioner or something like that. You're gonna go, wow, it seems really condescending. And I want you to know that I have a much higher level of respect for all of you, because this is grad school, and I am a professor, not a high school teacher, and I don't consider any of you to be high school students. So, now we got the disclaimer out of the way. Can I hit play now?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
ULI has always been about nurturing tomorrow's leaders, the emerging leaders, the future leaders of the industry, the future
Actually, wait,
leaders.
I'm going to interrupt you. How many of you are members of ULI right now?
We all
All of us are.
Okay, good. Okay, then I'm done. Don't need to make that plug. Great networking opportunities usually. Their conference, if you can afford it, it's usually okay. As an academic, they don't really give academic discounts. So me going to their conferences doesn't really make sense, because I don't get to play those games that developers play.
Communities. And starting with the high schools with the urban plan curriculum is an amazing foundational
Get it right
component
here,
of
right?
that.
It teaches and brings to life core fundamental values, things like supply and demand and trade-offs. And so it really becomes a way of bringing to life activities that the students are learning about in the class.
The program really provides students an opportunity to take what's theoretical and often abstract and really make it meaningful and real and tangible, so they can really apply the principles that they've been learning.
I love everything that it does for kids, from actually teaching them core economic concepts that are really important, like opportunity cost, trade-offs, all those kinds of things. It also teaches them how to work in groups. It teaches them, how to deal with personalities that may not be similar to your own. It tells them how to, teaches them how to problem solve, how to be professional, how to present something to a group of people that you may not know or may not be comfortable with. It's the best job interview experience you'll ever have. Before you actually have to go do a job interview, it's a great experience.
See what I'm saying?
The idea of being able to work with high school students who were learning economics struck me as a great opportunity to be able to give back to the community and share the experience that I gained with the next generation of leaders.
And to really challenge them as a facilitator to some of the assumptions that they make. Most of them have this kind of an aha experience where they sit there and you ask them questions that they haven't really thought about. And then they start to think about it, and they go, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. And so it's given them a perspective on the development process that they've never even really thought about before.
The facilitators were extremely helpful. It was interesting to see the things that they would say because they're all specialized in different aspects. So like, for example, we had one person who was extremely focused on the aspect of what you see when you look out of a business window, as opposed to another person was all about like accessibility.
You start to think outside of the box. You see things where you wouldn't have seen them before. You start to drive down streets, you see urban planning on the streets, you start to think about the new options that are there.
You all get to play with Legos.
The entire program that these students go through culminates into a presentation that's given to a fictitious city council that's chaired by volunteers of the program. These students get up there and they pitch their redevelopment project.
To work with that sort of a team, create your own dynamic, collaborative spirit amongst you, and have that competitive spirit too, we're gonna win this project. The city council is gonna vote yes for our project and our proposal for urban plan. So being able to present and public speak in front of a city council and convey and articulate your message and essentially sell your project, that would be an invaluable experience before you go into college and even into your careers.
City council is my favorite day because that's the day that you get to see the end product.
Just by show of hands, when do you want to watch the rest of this? Okay.
For what these kids have been working on, you see the pride behind it. You see the competition and that competitive fire in them that they want to win. You walk into the room and there's a bunch of nervous students. Sometimes they're gathered and they're huddling, and that's very much like the beginning of any city council meeting. Then they do their presentations. They're very, very good at thinking on their feet. We ask them hard questions on the city council, and you can always tell the group that gels well together by how well they team up to answer the questions. And that's why urban plan is so cool, is because it becomes a thing that the students hear about, want to participate in, and it's a real world experience that translates immediately in their experience into their real life.
I thought that most of the plans would look very similar. Every one of them is completely different from the other. And they all are very good, each and of themselves. And so they all just have addressed these different interests in different ways, which has shown me that there's more than one way to be able to do this, and there's no one right answer. And for them to be able to justify why they did what they did is great, and to know that they've thought through this on their own.
ULI Arizona is the only district council in the system that has one interesting piece to the urban plan program that we do, and that is a site tour. The winning teams from urban plan are brought to an actual mixed-use development downtown Phoenix. It's an on-the-ground, boots on the ground, moment for these kids after they've gone through the whole urban plan curriculum in their schools to actually stand in the middle of a mixed-use project.
We started our day at RED Development, and they got to go up and sit in the conference rooms, and RED Development walked them through kind of how they developed this whole plan and sort of walked through the different roles that the kids actually take on too, and what this looked like and the different phases of planning that they had to go through, and just very similar to what the kids have to do. And after that, it's really cool because we get to go on a walking tour and we get to go see some of the very same types of buildings that the kids had to think about building in their plans. So one of those was 44th and Monroe, which is really cool, and the kids love this because they get to go all the way up to the penthouse. And for most of them who are suburbanites, they don't ever really get to see high-rise buildings. So going up into the penthouse was awesome. They get to see what that looks like. It's also pretty cool because at that particular location, you can see a YMCA from the building, and that's one of the things they have to think about in their plan. You can also see the remains of what used to be a homeless shelter in that area, and so that again ties back into their own plans. Just all around a super cool experience for them to connect back to, this is real life, it's very similar to what you just did in your project. And I think any of the kids that went on that it really brought it around and connected all those dots for them to be like, okay, I get it.
I think urban plan is loved by the students because it is so different, because it is so in-depth, it is real-world practice that these students are getting. It's diverse, it's hands-on, it's interactive, it's interaction with professionals in an industry, and it's real. It's so much like reality. It is reality. We're going through a real-life process, and students are working in that process from beginning to end. It requires a lot of thought and creativeness. It requires diversity, and I think their expectations at the beginning are changed by the end, and to a large degree, they're changed people.
When I was in high school, most of the learning was fairly traditional classroom work. We didn't do any project-based learning where you had to work in a team and really learn the dynamics of working in a team environment. You quickly learn in college, and then when you get into your career, that so much of what you do is project-based. And I think the ability for students to be exposed to project-based learning in high school will give them a real advantage as they move on to the college level and ultimately into their career.
In my high school, vocational training was shop, right? You went and you worked on cars, or you did wood shop or whatever. This is vocational training, or at least enough of it to be meaningful that's at a whole different level. I think it satisfies the intellect of very smart and curious young people.
I bet that they all leave school and they look around and they look at the communities that they live in, and they have a better understanding of the dynamics of the interplay of all the uses. They look at the shopping centers differently and how those contribute to the cities. They probably view all our municipal governments differently and how they provide amenities and services in general.
I feel like I would be more involved with my community now. I understand how important it is to state my opinions, especially to, say, a city council or somebody who has more power within to do something that I want to be seen, that I want to see done. And I feel like I understand the importance of speaking up for what I feel would be best for my city as well.
I would definitely recommend this class to another student because it really does teach you how to take what you learn and put it into practice instead of just taking a test here. You have to give a presentation to a city council and prove that not only do you know your stuff, but the stuff that you have is better than anybody else's. So if you're into competitions and if you're really into applying what you learned, this is a great class for you.
It opens kids' eyes to see that there's all of these careers that they may not even be aware exist. And if I would have had it in high school, I think it just opens doors. It opens doors to marketing, architecture, finance. It opens so many doors. I wish I would have had an experience like this.
Whether or not their career happens to be in real estate or development or land use, maybe it's in finance, maybe it's in medical, it won't even matter, but they'll have a better understanding about how the community and the world around them is created and developed.
Y'all can clap if you want. So here's the thing. Sure, that video seemed a little bit lower than the scale of intellect and pure genius currently in this room. But the parameters of urban plan, the constraints are still relevant. The lack of flexibility, as well as having a little bit of flexibility within those parameters, all those things should still make sense in terms of this project. So it might seem like they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're all a lot more seasoned than most of those students are. Some of you have done RFPs, or responded to them previously. How many of you have presented to a city commission? Okay, so that whole idea of presenting essentially your plan to a group of people where you need that approval, those are all things from a real estate development standpoint that some of you might not have had to do yet. But at some point, essentially what you have to do for this project would be similar to what you would have to do in the real world, in terms of trying to get a city commission to approve your project. Especially in South Florida, where you're talking about the constraints that we have from a land development standpoint, where you need to get approvals to do a lot of things now. And it's going to become a lot more difficult in the future as they start putting more and more constraints in place, where it might be the developer has to pay for all the infrastructure at some point in the future. Or you might have to make a much stronger case for why you should get incentives to do what you want to do. So despite that video sort of being on like a Sunday morning cartoon scale, the project itself, for those of you, once everybody reads their own plan like you're going to do between now and the next class to get all caught up for what's going on, that'll give you a lot more insight in terms of what the expectation is for this type of project. So big picture, again, it was sort of mentioned in that video, but it's to develop an understanding of the various stakeholders in the development process, which some of you may or may not know, and the challenge of reconciling their often competing agendas to create a well-designed, market-responsive, sustainable project. That's the overarching goal. So to some extent, for those of you that are working for development firms that have to go out and get something approved, it's essentially doing the same thing that some of you might already be doing in your jobs. And to some extent, for those of you that want to get into real estate development, it will become more of your job, especially if you're good at it. And when I say especially if you're good at it, I've tried to get some guest speakers to come talk to this class. And the problem is that there is a huge number of city commissions that have their meetings on Tuesday nights. And so the idea is, hey, I'll come and talk to your class, but if I have something going on, I'm not going there. Because they're leaving money on the table if they're here when they could be in front of the city commission trying to get a project approved.
We'll just take this.
So I don't want to, well, that is a possibility. I'd have to look more into the FAU, or sorry, not, the NOVA rules about if I do a class off-site. Because the other thing is that one development, actually, there was a redevelopment of something in Fort Lauderdale that's right on the, I can't remember the name of the development, just for this one council item, or city commission item, they were debating it for 6 hours. Thank you. Yeah.
Peter Hen.
Yeah, did he talk about that?
Yes.
He came in and worked real ragged the next day, and I was like, what did you do last night? He's like, I was
Stayed
up
up
till
till
like
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll cut out before 4.
So, but we'll figure something out. So, how many agree with the statement that teamwork makes your dream work? Yes. We've got a couple right here. Yes. So obviously, shining example right here. But when we talk about group projects, I mean, you all answered true to that question on the survey.
We didn't have any other options.
That's right. It's like life. Thank you. So basically, from a team standpoint, one of the things you have to do is read, analyze, and synthesize complex information. So again, any type of real estate development, as you already know, there's a bunch of moving parts all the time. And the idea is, how do you synthesize, analyze, and make sense of these moving parts at a single point in time, which essentially be the culmination of the project at the end of the semester. So you also get to resolve challenging financial, social, political, and aesthetic issues. So how should this look? There's design guidelines that you have to read for the next class. Having an understanding of those design guidelines means that, okay, if somebody's giving you a couple of rules, and the idea is that if you follow those rules well enough, whether you like them or not, you can get your project approved. And it's becoming more and more apparent, whether you're talking about things like Miami 21, which are these design guidelines that are becoming nationally known for how a neighborhood should look. And even though it might make it more expensive and price lower income families out of those neighborhoods, the idea is that, well, it might be better than nothing. So you at least have more cohesive areas. So, and when I put that spreadsheet that you don't need to bring on a floppy disk, but when I put that online in a couple of weeks, you'll get a better idea for the financial aspects. But until we get to that financial part, you're looking at more the social, political, and the aesthetic parts. And that's what we'll be talking about in next class and probably the class after that. So employ a computer-based financial spreadsheet. That's really, you do a lot of that in real estate development. So this part's relatively, well, not quite simple, because you got to match it up with the design guidelines and a variety of other things. So you can't say, hey, we're going to come up with the highest bottom line, so we're going to make 10,000 units on this site. Well, the design guidelines might say you can only put 1,000 or maybe even 100 units there. And the cash flow might not be what you want it to be. So the idea is, sure, you're working on that bottom line, but you also have some rules that you have to follow. And so again, those constraints are typically what you'll come across when trying to do this type of development in a city. So create a three-dimensional model of at their site. or of their site, that's where the Legos come into play. Sure, it's a little bit simplistic because we're using Legos, but a lot of you, I mean, there's one of you that knows how to use SketchUp, right? No, you're not getting called out. I'm just saying, I sort of know what we teach in the FAU curriculum. I won't do it anymore after this class.
There's more people in here that probably know SketchUp.
All right, so some of you can SketchUp, but the idea is that everybody can play with Legos. So, I'm right with you. You saw what I did, right? You see my handiwork. So essentially look at things like trade-offs. So balance these conflicts between public and private sector needs and wants of city government, neighborhood residents, the market, and investors. So you'll get to go through that whole process. What else? Do you have anything else on the slide? Oh, and then, at the very end, you present the proposal to me. So that's what's on tap for August. Here's a question I have for all of you. If the last class, instead of being on the 9th, were on August 6th,
We'll be okay with that.
who would that? I'll send an email out to everybody. Here's what I'm asking. I talked to Thomas. We talked about having our class compete against his class when the students do these presentations, and having a board of people actually sort of judge it. If it doesn't work on that Saturday, I'll just keep it on Tuesday night, because that's when class is scheduled. So it can only be on Saturday if it works for everybody.
So the 6th is on a Saturday.
What?
The 6th is on a
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
It gives us less time.
But
The only thing is there's another class on that Saturday.
No, accounting is the
Accounting is not Saturday.
No, the last accounting class
Saturday,
is the 13th.
yeah, it's Thursday.
anyway, I'll resolve it via email. I just put
Do
like
a survey then.
that's what I was gonna say. I'll put a one-question survey monkey. Might have more other questions. All right, so moving along. Some other things that urban plan is meant to address. They say that there's 4 points. One is lack of practical experience in multidisciplinary teams. And the idea is that you're all in real estate development in terms of the major. The roles that you'll be assigned to all have different responsibilities. So in other words, whereas some group projects, you'll have one person that does all the work. The idea is that there's 5 different roles associated with each one of these teams that each have to do their own work. So in other words, the specific role that you have, you're doing something specific for the entire project. Does that make sense? So lack of practical experience in multidisciplinary teams, lack of a practical understanding of and respect for the complex market and non-market forces that impact development, and how each professional discipline contributes to a buildable, sustainable solution. So that's just basically everybody here, and again, one of the reasons why I asked that about me stuff is to figure out what type of backgrounds do you have. And in terms of this, a lot of you already have a practical understanding of a lot of the issues related to market and non-market forces based on the jobs that you already have or experiences that you already have. Lack of critical thinking, that's kind of harsh to say that, but the idea is that with the end product of this project, you're going to have to look at essentially a very real-world example very critically in terms of design guidelines, constraints on development standards, and a variety of other things. And the 4th thing are weak skills in our articulating and advocating for their vision to colleagues outside their academic discipline, as well as to real clients. Now again, at the end, if we're just on a Tuesday night, I'm still going to try to get people for the 9th, but it might be easier for us to do it on a Saturday because most developers I know don't necessarily work on Saturday. So I'd be like, look, I know what you do on a Saturday morning. I mean, I'm saying like hang out, relax, have coffee. Why not relax with us? So I keep working on that. So in terms of these 5 to 7 roles, these are what they are. And again, in the urban plan, it lays out each one of these roles. But the idea is that not everybody can be the finance director and analyst. The reason why there's asterisks here is right now there's 15 students in the class. Technically there's supposed to be 16. So the idea is that if you have 5 specific roles and you have 15 students, how many groups does that equal? That's right. Glad everybody can count. So, so those are essentially the roles that would be laid out. And in terms of urban plan, I think this is in the student handbook. So I'm just going to kind of, yeah, because that's, what time did I say we'd get out? 10-ish, because there was a break in there. So all this is in urban plan in terms of the introduction. And in terms of the roles to do what, you essentially already know. That's going to be respond to a request for proposal for the redevelopment of a blighted site in a hypothetical community. So at this point, we take a quick time out. We're not done yet. We got 15 students right now. We need 3 groups. Do you want to make the groups yourselves, or do you want to do them randomly?
Make it yourself.
Do you think this is something that could be done in the last couple of minutes in an orderly fashion? Okay, so why don't we do this? Task, figure out your 3 groups. There's one more slide I have to go over in terms of what we're going to do when we get back. I mean, 2 weeks from now. So, if you can figure out your groups in a relatively orderly fashion, write down the names of the members, not the roles, just the members. Because the idea is that I'm going to let each one of your groups figure out these roles based on urban planning. So in other words, the roles are right here.
Is the idea that the winning team from our class would compete against the other classes?
No, the idea is that all 3 teams, we would knock this all out in one morning, wouldn't have class that Tuesday.
And then we'd be done.
And then, what?
What time?
Well, I think it's from 10 to 2. I'll get the details. That's why we're going to do this via Survey Monkey, because I can't, my ability to recall at 9:55 isn't that good. But I think it's from 10 to 2:30. I think.
I'd say 10 to 4.
10 to what?
10 to 4. Our county class is 10:30 to 4. So.
Oh, but it's only 4.5 hours. This class is 4.5. All right, so ready? Ready to group? 5 people, go.
Everybody move at once.
Do you get a group ready?
Yep. We have a group.
Okay.
Taken. Bam.
All right, so those 5.
No, that doesn't look very
Like that.
So that's how it is. I got,
So who's left?
We're left.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4.
wow. Yes.
I didn't say it.
Sometimes when things happen voluntarily instead of randomly, I can't make sense of it. I didn't make the choices.
We just
It's fine.
But
We're on the same color, we're students.
that's right.
Yes, it doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Okay, so everybody puts their name in your group, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, all on one sheet? That'll work too.
Do you need last name?
And so here's what I'm going to do. How many of you have worked in groups on Blackboard? Yeah. All right, so Blackboard has a way to think of it as like Dropbox, but it's all done through Blackboard. It's essentially like a backup to some extent, so you can post things up there, you can discuss. I can set all that up. If there are other ways that you would like to do it, that's fine too. You can use Dropbox or Box.com just as easily. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll set all that stuff up in Blackboard. Give me like, I'll have it done by like tomorrow afternoon. I got some stuff tomorrow morning. Actually, it should be done by like 10. But so I'll set up these groups because you can also post things like your pertinent information, whether it's emails. Basically in groups, if I set it up in Blackboard the way I set it up previously, you can email everybody, do all that other stuff, but just within the group. And technically there's a 16th student. I don't know, because what if none of the 3 groups want this student?
What is it?
I said, technically there's 16 students in this class, because one student is absent.
More than that. What they come?
Seriously? Okay.
What's his name?
Chelsea.
I think that's a he. Tracy?
Everyone's like.
What's a he?
Tracy Lewis Charles? Maybe not?
I don't know him from Mark. Mark is out.
I wonder if it's a new student. I'll try to find that. Well, no, wait. So we got all our groups set, right? And we're not done now. We're not done yet. It's only 10. I'm sorry, Fred. Hey, Fred, it's 10:25. My bad. All right. So, you know these are the 5 to 7 roles, right? Oh wait, do you have the master sheet yet? Let's go. Okay.
Everybody got like email?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I just use that word.
Everything, do everything.
Really? I can't make any routines in all of the restaurants. I mean, I usually aim here, and usually I get up to tomorrow in there. I swear. I'm gonna try to bring it. We're excited because the Cavs are up by 22 points at halftime. You know.
No, we group 2, yes.
I get off restraint because I'm like, oh, right. But some people pretend it is. Some people are like,
Where do you guys
It's like you guys, well, I'm the only one that lives far, but like I didn't really mind driving by. Where are you?
Alright, so we're almost at the end. I got like 37 slides.
So we can meet like Deerfield-y, like here at.
Except for
Yeah, I mean, I'm down with Fort Lauderdale.
We can meet Fort Lauderdale.
I'm North Fort Lauderdale.
Deerfield's like far, Deerfield's like 20 minutes.
That's probably far.
I think like, yeah, Fort Lauderdale, like
Yeah,
around
Fort Lauderdale.
campus area.
Alright.
So like,
So everybody's cool with your groups?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is keep an eye out for an announcement that'll get emailed to you. You also get an email with the homework assignment, which a lot of you are going to be like, why is he making us do this? Well, part of it is just because, just for fun. I've never taught this class before, so I want you to think like I pulled this off the shelf and I was like, I'll just shove it in here and make it work. I actually had to do work to prepare this class. I mean, just floating around my floor sitting at the beach, but instead, I'm working just as hard as I hope all of you work this summer. Yeah. Actually, no, I hope all of you work harder than I do. But anyway, so for the next class, a couple of things, okay? So first, oh, sorry, I'm going backwards. We don't need to see that again. So first, buy the book. Best $30 or less that you might ever spend. Basic, simple book. The reading, again, isn't that hard. It flows pretty well. Sometimes it gets a little bit fuzzy, as you saw with some of the things I put on the slides. So there's the book. Not just buy it, though. Like, crack it open. I want to see some cracked spines. You don't really have to bring the book to class, but the reading isn't awful. So read chapters 1 and 2 if you haven't gotten a chance to read them. Even if you are going to order the book, chapters 1 and 2 are online in PDF form in the Blackboard on the course website. And Chapters 3 to 4, can't put those on, just for copyright reasons, but when you get the book, read those also. So, also in terms of reading the book, if you're having trouble sleeping tonight, knock out chapters 1 and 2. It should help you out a little bit. In terms of reading Urban Plan, if you haven't read the first 26 pages, read those. What's more important is 27 to 46, those are the building types, so you'll get some background in terms of the Legos that we'll play with at some point in the future. And especially read 47 to 56, because when I set up the group, whatever you want to call it, the group sections in Blackboard, you're going to have to figure out who's going to be doing what roles. And rather than just grabbing them based on the title, it's important to read the roles because that tells you what you're going to be doing. And the other reason why it's important to assign roles is because next class you're going to get some time in the second half. Rather than listen to me, you're going to get to listen to each other as you work out some of these various issues related to the roles. What else do we have on there? Teams, well, we already assigned the team, so we can skip that. I just kind of tossed that one out there. What else?
Numbers.
Oh, the assignment, I'll be sending that to you tomorrow via email. It'll be attached.
Senior financial list.
It's a PDF. Do I have anything else?
Reverse assign. Reverse design.
I explain it. I mean, it's explained.
Okay.
Okay, we're doing the team next class, not for the next class.
Not
Sorry, what's-
I've done a little bit of development.
We're gonna do the team
Yeah, sometimes
assignments
we have
during the next
redevelopment
class,
classes.
right?
Right, so it's going to be more of a discussion, but do the reading so that you know which role you want to do. Because that's the thing, is that there might be some conflict, because not everybody gets to do the finance stuff.
Right.
So you guys will have to figure that out, and if there's any issues, we'll get to resolve those next time.
And we take to get each other.
And we need to know the rules
Diane said she's
before
gonna email
class.
Right, so delineate roles before class. I'll email all this out, but,
Wait, but you're.
so everyone will have it.
On next Tuesday.
Any other questions?
We all have next.
Right, right, so the assignment that you're gonna get emailed tomorrow is due for next class. So really don't bother me between this class and next class. No, but if you have any questions, also, I think Fred's gonna be putting this entire lecture online tomorrow. I don't, how's he get those out to you?
No, I think he told us, he told,
Just
I
like
waited
for
for
Fred,
it.
just you.
If they know how to get to it.
Yeah. Project finance.
All right, are there any questions before I stop that?
Email us the lecture.
Well, no, they're all on this.
I know.
See, the reason why I can't.
But a lot of the stuff like that he even went over, like you wouldn't have been able to, if you've never done it before, you
So
wouldn't
it's-
have been able to figure out.
Yeah.
So next Tuesday, when we following along, just fine.
When he's teaching.
But when he
Oh, I got that. When you get.